Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tim Lee. I'm a research analyst at Red Cloud Securities. I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on copper and gold exploration and development today. We will hear from Sam Lee, President and CEO, and Robin Tolbert, VP Exploration of NorthIsle Copper and Gold. During today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this NorthIsle webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of the NorthIsle corporate presentation that can be found on the company's website, northisle.ca. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors, and participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on NorthIsle Copper and Gold. So we have NorthIsle presenting today. The company is focused on exploration development of its North Island property in British Columbia. There's a large property with resources in 2 porphyry deposits and additional exploration potential. A recent PEA demonstrates robust project economics, and the company is conducting a drill program to further expand on the already large resource. With that, I now turn it over to Sam and Robin to update our audience on the company.
Well, thanks very much, Tim, and thank you to Red Cloud for once again giving us this opportunity to provide a bit of an update on our exploration and development activities. We're actually coming to you from our site office here in Port Hardy. We've been hosting a number of analyst and investor tours over the past few weeks. In fact, I invite anybody who's interested in coming over and taking a look at what we're talking about and providing context. It's only about a 50-minute flight from Vancouver, and certainly you can do the trip in a day. So please reach out to us if you have any interest in coming on site and exploring what we are doing here at NorthIsle. I have with me our new VPX, Robin Tolbert, today to help give just a glimpse of all the activities that we are advancing over the next few months. And then I'll end the presentation to talk about what to expect over the next 6 to 12 months as we continue to find and develop our very attractive North Island project into pre-feasibility. As Tim mentioned, I will be making forward-looking statements, and I advise everyone to read in detail our disclosure on slide 2. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with the story, we have a very large copper, gold, molybdenum, and rhenium deposit in BC. As Tim mentioned, we just issued a preliminary economic study that outlines a 22-year mine life, annual production about 150 million pounds of copper equivalent over the life of the mine over the 22 years. With a very attractive after-tax net present value, 8% at $1.1 billion, and after-tax IRR of almost 20% with a short payback of 3.9 years. So we've identified the best way to increase shareholder value is to go through rapidly the stage gates of sustainable development of our project into pre-feasibility study and feasibility study, which we can get into a little bit more detail later. The group that has been essentially assembled over the last 10 years is extremely experienced in financing, exploring, developing, and operating large, meaningful, significant mines across the world. And with the help of Robin, we are very aggressively continuing our exploration program across our vast 50-kilometer strike length property, which starts from BHP's historical Island copper mine to our south. Next slide. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on copper, but suffice it to say that the consensus and what we very strongly believe is that there will be a significant deficit in the market over the next 10 years. 7 million tons identified by Wood Mackenzie rather, and 8 million tons deficit identified by Goldman Sachs. So our key objective and strategy is focused on developing our asset within this time period. In terms of capital markets profile, well, I joined the company about a year ago. We're obviously in growth mode, hyper growth mode. We've essentially re-established the management team, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We've advanced our project aggressively. We've raised $10 million, no warrants. We have approximately $9.1 million of cash. So our current program, as defined in our development and exploration module, is fully financed. We've introduced very significant high net worth investors and institutions as part of those financings. Our insiders are still extremely levered to the story, holding approximately 18% on a basic basis and over 20% on a fully diluted basis. I haven't taken a salary this year. I fully levered through options that were granted to me on my initial start in October. I've also purchased 2 million shares through the last 9 months and continue to do so. Retail obviously is a smaller component of our shareholder base at 17%, which perhaps contributes to not as much trading as what we would like to see, but we're obviously building that out. On the institutional basis, we have 3 research that cover us. Taylor, in fact, at Red Cloud is on site yesterday and today, conducting due diligence. We're also covered by Michael Gray and Chris Thompson, who have also both been on site. Michael Gray last year and Chris Thompson just wrote a report yesterday on the site visit that he attended last week. In terms of our leadership, look, we've been brought together based on the premise of extraordinary experience, deriving from all of our past work for large companies, but we're nimble and we've got the tenacity and the energy to bring this forward, which is what this project needs. We've been extremely active in terms of the succession planning and retooling the company to take it to this next leg of growth, starting with obviously myself joining last October, Nick Van Dyke, who is our CFO-elect, Kevin O'Kane, who's ex-BHP for 40 years, also was the chief mining engineer for Island Copper, which is the BHP mine that sits adjacent to us. Michelle Tanguay, who is the head of our sustainability and community relations group, coming to us from GT Gold. And last but not certainly least, Robin Tolbolt, who is with me today. He has over 40 years experience focusing on copper, gold, porphyry deposits around the world, associated with majors and juniors and intermediates alike. He succeeds Jack McClintock, who remains as a strategic advisor to the company, which we believe is exceedingly helpful as it relates to continuity and drawing from his vast experience. So again, this is a very significant large copper gold porphyry system deposit. We have approximately 5 billion pounds of copper equivalent in indicated and approximately 3.8 billion pounds in inferred. 35% of this is of our revenue stream is gold. And so if you want to look at this as a gold equivalent basis, that's 9.3 million ounces of gold equivalent in indicated and 5.6 million ounces of additional ounces of gold equivalent in inferred. Obviously, the way that we think about this in terms of developability is that we are definitely in a vast, highly prospective district, 50-kilometer strike length of known porphyry systems that Robin can get into more detail later on in the presentation. And then, of course, one of the most important things around developability and costs associated with that is that we are surrounded by established infrastructure derived from being only about a few kilometers away from Port Hardy, which is where we're presenting from, and about 25 kilometers away from BHP's historical Island Copper Mine, which still has a deep sea water port. That is, I guess, encapsulated in this next map here. So the gray are our tenements. The blue, Red Dog and Hushamu, represents what our project, as defined by the PEA, contributes. In the copper red color, that's where our exploration targets, Northwest Expo to the north, Goodspeed to the east of Red Dog, Macintosh to the southeast of Hushamu, and then Pemberton Hills. We've just completed our 2021 program, sitting between Hushamu, excuse me, and Island Copper. So Island Copper is that blob to the right, bottom right, owned by BHP, operated by BHP for 24 years. Pretty much the same, very similar grade, very similar style of a copper porphyry deposit, similar byproducts, gold, moly, rhenium, and arguably is one of the closest deep sea water ports from continental America to Japan, which is where they sold their concentrate to Sumitomo. So this is high purity, low deleterious elements, low arsenic concentrate that could be sold anywhere around the world, including the most discernible buyers in Sumitomo. So just to give a sense of magnitude and where we stand in terms of current copper porphyry systems that are being operated in BC, if we were in production today, we would be the second largest producer among the producers today. From a grade profile, we kind of sit right in the middle. One of the key differences here is the components, our gold components. We have 33% of our revenue. It comes from gold, which is quite unique based on our peers in BC. So we believe that this is a highly developable mine. We believe that we can go ahead and be included as one of these producers in BC because of all the attributes that I've described thus far. One of also the big components around this project is its very low strip ratio of 0.7 to 1 waste to ore. That encapsulated by the fact that we are using about a 7.5 cent kilowatt hour price for power, extremely cheap in BC, all of it being derived from renewable sources, including hydroelectric and wind. We believe that this project, again, is one of the most developable projects in Canada today. In terms of the economics, we performed the PEA at a $3.25 copper price assumption. Our resources were done at a $3 price. Every 25-cent movement in copper increases the project NPV by about $300 million. So this spot price that you see on the right-hand side, that was as of February 2nd. Spot price was $3.50. That's essentially the result of a spot price, copper spot price of $3.50, which is an extraordinary leverage to copper. In terms of where we're obviously relatively positioned from a valuation perspective, we clearly are among the lowest valued opportunities out there. And I can understand why that is. We've obviously been in a very aggressive copper pricing environment where copper prices have moved very quickly. We are a big project. We are a significant project, as you can see from the chart on top. And as there's a general acceptance that copper will stay kind of above $4, I think what you're going to see is people reverting more towards these larger opportunities where we obviously preside. We're not too big. We're certainly not on the other end of the threshold where it's not possible to see us developing this ourselves. The way I characterize it is we're kind of right in the middle of the fairway as it relates to size. It's a perfect opportunity for investors and strategics alike. And as we go through our de-risking process, as you see on the bottom chart, you will get a re-rating. There is value to de-risking and de-risking quickly, which is, again, what is informing our strategy moving ahead. In terms of our strip ratio, extremely low. This is another reason, as I alluded to before, why our economics are so attractive. It's that for Red Dog alone, our strip is less than 0.2 to 1. This informs the first 6 years of our project. So we literally have drills on site as we speak, and we'll start drilling tonight on Red Dog to see if we can expand this higher grade, lower strip portion of the deposit. Overall, our strip, as I mentioned, is 0.7 to 1. That's informed by Red Dog and Hushamu. And Hushamu itself, as you can see, is a very low strip deposit with a higher grade pods existing in the valley and towards the hill to the left. In terms of capital, I would consider us as a moderate capital intensity project, and that's aligned by the fact that we are a medium to large size copper mine. 22-year life in my mind for copper is a medium to large copper mine. So our capital intensity is commensurate with that. We are in the lowest part of the cost curves, and that's, again, attributed to the low strip ratio, cheap power, and existing infrastructure that I mentioned. In terms of sustainability, like this is what attracted me to the opportunity. I obviously have been involved in the capital markets for over 20 years, over $100 billion of M&A and equity transactions. And what really resonated to me with this opportunity is that it was in a leading jurisdiction that has strong rule of law, extremely strong fabric, social license, renewable power. That wind farm that you see in that picture is in fact on the northern end of our property. It supplies 99 megawatts of power, entirely acceptable to assume that we would be drawing from that either directly or through the grid as we try to establish a carbon neutral project moving forward. I'm going to pass it over to Robin, our explorationist, but I'd like to sort of just give you a brief overview as to what we are focused on in our fully financed 2021 budget. It's compartmentalized into two buckets. One is the expansion of our NorthIsle project, not only in terms of tonnage, but also in terms of grade. And that consists of obviously the drilling that we're currently doing on Red Dog and Northwest Expo, and then moving to Hushamu sometime in the early fall. And then, of course, the new discovery deposits, which are plentiful, but we have focused our intentions on 4 targets, including Northwest Expo, Goodspeed, South Macintosh, and Pemberton Hills. So with that, I'd like to pass you off to Robin Tolbert.
Good morning to everybody in British Columbia, and good afternoon to everybody else. First of all, I'm going to talk about Hushamu, which we're going to be doing some drilling on later in the year to look for an extension of the deposit to the southeast. As Sam mentioned, there's 473 million tons of 0.2 copper, 0.23 grams per ton gold, 0.008 moly, and 0.35 ppm rhenium, which is not in the PEA. There's an additional inferred 414 million tons, and we have 54 million tons of indicated at Red Dog. The objective of the next couple of years is to bring that inferred resource of Hushamu up to at least indicated, which would give us 942 million tons of resource, getting close to a billion-ton resource. So just to give you the distance here, from Northwest Expo to beyond Cole Harbor is over 50 kilometers. People don't realize the extent of this until they come here. I'm going to be looking at all these exploration plays in a moment. Go to the next slide. Next slide. So I have to do it. Okay. So starting looking at island copper mineralization and alteration. This is after Parejo in 1996. He wrote a paper on island copper, and it's a composite diagram of the alteration. And what I want to point out is the porphyroite and dumortierite, which occurs very close to the mineralization, as does this bi-type magnetite. And of particular importance for us is this chlorite magnetite, the CMG. I'll be mentioning that a number of times through this talk. And the CMG, the chlorite magnetite, we believe is a retrograde alteration of the bi-type magnetite. And it occurs close to the ore. It occurs here, island copper in the past. It occurs at Hushamu, adjacent, and within the ore. It occurs adjacent and within the ore at Red Dog, as you can see. And we've just found it at one other place. So next slide. So starting off with Pemberton Hills, this is a huge lithocap which extends from the top right at way beyond this slide down to the southeast, about 8 kilometers, and it's obviously generated by a huge hydrothermal system. And what you're seeing here, the green is the lithocap, and then the yellow is the silica cap on top of that, and the red dots are chargeability anomalies. So the drilling that was taking place in 2018 and 2021, before I got here, was focused on drilling through the lithocap, which we never really did. And we had a historic hole here. If you can see EC 156 of 0.14 copper. And recent work has indicated that, in fact, this is tilted. And if you can imagine this, we look at this chargeability anomaly here, which is only is really not completed to the northeast here. You have a horseshoe shape around this arrow, and the thought is that to the northeast is where the source of the hydrothermal fluids that created this immense lithocap occurs. This is looking at it in 3D. We just did this recently. The chargeability on the top left there, the chargeability anomaly is in 3D there. And in the drill holes, you have kaolinite, which is a pink color, orotholite red, and the light green is dickite. Now, all these occur in the upper levels of the porphyry, and the porphyry generally lower down towards the source. And the porphyry, and it all indicates that it's pointing to the northeast. And on the bottom right, you have the chargeability in red, and you have pyrite abundance in yellow, and clearly pointing to the source of that to the northeast again. This is looking at the tilted lithocap, looking towards Holberg Inlet, and you can see the dip is to the northwest and southwest, and then obviously the opposite direction. If you can imagine a mushroom, the mushroom is the lithocap and the stem is the porphyry, so the stem is to the northeast. And as I said, it extends over 8 kilometers, and you have this to the southeast. You have this block faulted portions of the lithocap extending to the southeast. Part of it, some of it's being mined for silica. And putting all this together in a conceptualized model, which is not to scale, to the left would be these 2 little blocks that were faulted down. And you can see where you have the kaolinite dickite in the center, where the source of the fluids is, and porphyry at depth. And so what we're going to do, the drilling was taking place in the past, essentially directly vertically down from where it says kaolinite dickite. And so we're looking now at the source of the mineralization to the northeast. This is a composite. This is looking southeast to northwest, so it would be slightly towards us to the northeast. Now, looking at Red Dog Northwest Expo, the green in the middle is the resource area of Red Dog. It has there's a dashed line below it, which is a fault, which has a 70-degree dip to the south. And the dashed line below that with the red stars in the middle, that is a silica clay pyrite alteration. A silica clay pyrite alteration occurs typically above porphyry. And the objective, so what's happened is that the south side is dropped down and preserved, and the up portion of where the silica clay pyrite has been eroded and has exposed the mineralization at Red Dog. So the objective of the 3 stars at the bottom is to drill through the silica cap and intersect the extension of the porphyry that is at Red Dog down below the silica cap. And then the 4th star with this half horseshoe shape is a chargeability anomaly, which we're going to test. There were 4 holes, that were drilled there in the past. They never got through overburden, and our objective this year is to get through that overburden. And then up to the 4 stars in the top is our Northwest Expo holes. And their previous drilling, as you can see, there was 1 gram of gold and 0.17% copper over 95 meters. And there were other holes were equally good grades, reasonable grades, but there was no drilling to the north And the objective, I think they were looking for underneath the silica cap and thinking it wasn't tilted. And our objective is to look to the northeast again, anticipating a tilted deposit. And 3 kilometers from Red Dog, if you go to the right of Red Dog, you see a circle there which says Goodspeed. This is, again, was drilled in the past, short holes. You get 0.32% copper over 24 meters, 0.19 over 72 meters, etc. And what was there's recent mapping that was done, it wasn't really recognized in the past, is there was this, and I found it again, is this chlorite magnetite alteration. And it's been mapped over a length of 500 meters by 350 meters width. And that is an exciting discovery for us. So this is showing the geology of Red Dog, and the silica clay pyrite alteration is the yellow here, where we're drilling into below the fault. And note the CMG, the chlorite magnetite, adjacent to the deposit, which is the red dashed line there. So this is showing that in real life. You have the ellipse, which is the approximate location of the Red Dog deposit, and the 3 holes that we're drilling into the silica clay pyrite on the bottom right, and the hole drilling into the chargeability anomaly on the left. This is Northwest Expo, again, showing the chargeability anomalies here, which were not completed, but clearly they extend towards the area that we're planning to drill. And this is looking at Northwest Expo. The historic hole is the copper-colored one with 95 meters of 1 gram gold, 0.17 copper. And the yellow line is the extent of the silica clay pyrite alteration, which is all the yellow, orange, and white exposures in the cliffs and road cuts. And we're drilling to the north of that, where there's OIP anomalies. This is Goodspeed. This is showing the outcrop that was cut by a road, and it's clearly fractured. There's gypsum veining, stockworking, which is after anhydrite, and you have this CMG chlorite magnetite alteration with copper mineralization, as you can see in the little box on the top right. So going towards Hushamu, there's the Hushamu deposit, is the cream-colored area, and there's resource opportunity expansion to the southeast of that, where the arrow's pointing. Those 3 drills, actually going to drill more than 3 drill holes in that area to expand the resource. And recently, there was some logging road cut through the area which is called Macintosh, and has exposed this huge silica clay pyrite alteration zone. And we've mapped it, and it's all silica clay pyrite. And the objective now is to look at, do clay studies with a TerraSpec analyzer, and determine the clay mineralogy to allow us to vector in where the best place to drill, where there's the high fluid flow, the hotter part of the system, and then we'll do IP, and then we will drill that target. This is showing Macintosh, and you can see the road, this cream and orangey color silica clay pyrite alteration extending where the arrows is, and in recent slides throughout this area. This is a huge area, and it's adjacent to Hushamu, which is off to the left. Sam, over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Robin. And I hope there are a few takeaways here. One is just to see the vastness of our properties. Really, it's something you cannot really appreciate unless you do the flyover, unless you come to site, unless you drive the roads. And just the access to all of these targets that we are, obviously have identified and pursuing. The access to these targets are incredible through these logging roads. Through some of them actually are maintained by the BC government. Also, we are extremely active, right? So we are now a third of the way through our drill program. As I mentioned, Red Dog, Hushamu, Northwest Expo, that is to come over the next 3, 4, 5 months in terms of what to expect for the rest of this year. In terms of the project development, we have gone through a very thoughtful exercise in terms of identifying the critical path items to get to a two-year time period to develop this project. That's 2 years of monitoring, which is prescribed by the BC government, 2 years of environmental permitting, which overlaps with the 2 years, but the 2 years starts once you actually have the data for the environmental monitoring, and then you get to a production decision in 4 years, and then construction in the last 2 years. And so that will focus our strategy on hitting this project's production timeline within what people are calling for an incredible environment for copper. And so we've identified critical path items. We've budgeted $1 million to develop or to start the development to stay on this timeline, which we've released about a month ago. The details are in that press release, but effectively is starting the monitoring process, engaging in First Nations, getting participation agreements in place with these First Nations, all of which we are focused on doing this year. So that's the next steps, and really, again, I encourage people who are interested in the story to reach out to us directly. We're more than happy to take individuals through the story and even bring them up to site to give them perspective of what we see here today. It's a beautiful day in Port Hardy. And thanks again for your time, and Red Cloud for having us. At this point, we're happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Sam and Robin, for a very informative presentation. We'll now start the Q&A portion of this webinar. Reminder to everyone on the line, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We already do have a few questions here. First, it's a little more on the geological side. It says, in the recent press release, it was stated that the drill holes intersected a lithocap and a silica zone below the lithocap. Could you describe this silica zone?
Well, the silica zone is the vuggy silica, part of the alteration on the lithocap. Simply put. Okay.
And another question kind of generally here, and kind of relates to what you were saying about visiting the site. And I think there were some photos, but please tell us about the topography. How mountainous is the area, and how does this affect your ability to conduct exploration and development?
Sure, I'll let Robin address the exploration question. I can address the development. It actually works in our favor to some extent. So the mountains or ranges are approximately 700 meters, so not very high at all. Where we're considering our tailings management facility is between two ranges that effectively protects the water flow from the Hoburg Inlet and Nobody Lake to the north. So it's in a position right now where we're actually using two of the mountains as two of the four walls that we need to establish as part of our tailings waste facility, which you find is tremendously helpful. We have discussed this with Chief and Council for our First Nations partner, and their comment simply was just, visually speaking, there's low impact from a visual perspective around some of the surrounding activities. And that's helped by the fact that it's almost hidden in the Hushamu Valley, and that the levels at the bottom of the valley are reasonably level. So clearly, we have to do all of this work, starting with the environmental monitoring and the stations and the hydro activities that we're establishing today as part of our $1 million budget. But visually, when you fly over it and through our consultation process with First Nations and communities, there seems to be a very good position that we're in right now because of some of the topography. In terms of access, we literally, with your analyst Taylor yesterday, drove the entire property from end to end. We're considering obviously transporting our concentrate from the Hushamu deposit to the deep sea water port that currently exists at the BHP property, which is 25 kilometers. That took us, Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, but that took us about a 30 minutes drive.
Yep.
It was a 30-minute drive from Hushamu, right? And it was on very well graded roads. Obviously, there are logging roads right now, and we've got established a very strong relationship with Western Forest Products, who have the surface logging rights for the area. It's all second, third generation growth. There's no old growth left. It's been logged for over 100 years now. And so, from Robin's perspective, and I'll let him speak to it, access to all of these targets are quite incredible because, the logging roads have provided us that directly.
Exactly, Sam. That's exactly right. And in terms of exploration, you saw on the exposure picture of Macintosh, they've opened up that area, and we can drive to the top of Hushamu Mountain, drive to most of the places. All our of the 8 holes on Red Dog and Northwest Expo, they're all on reactivated logging roads, and only 2 are helicopter. So the majority of our drilling will be where there's road access or just off the road, and we have a road use and maintenance agreement with Western Forest Products, and they've been very helpful, and we have a good working relationship with them, as Sam mentioned.
Yeah, I also like to say that the substation that we would obviously use would be out of Port Hardy. Port Hardy is about a 20-30 minute drive from Red Dog and from obviously Island Copper as well, and 80% of that drive is on a BC maintained. Provincially maintained road. Power lines go right across the property through these logging areas. Obviously, this is the point we're trying to make, and it really can't describe it unless you see it. And hopefully, Taylor takes some good pictures, and if he doesn't, we can provide him with some in his report. But it is quite remarkable to see how everything is laid out and perfectly positioned for the development of this project.
Great. Do have a different kind of question here, but on back to the exploration side. Given the size of your project and the data-rich history, would you consider AI for target generation in order to further de-risk drilling and creating less environmental impact?
AI meaning artificial intelligence?
I think so.
Presumably. Well, we do. You can see that we're looking at getting all the information. That's one of the things we're doing, is compiling all the information, and for example, there's a lot of information available in the analysis, and we can do metal ratioing, for example, and we can do clay analysis of the core, and that. But really, artificial, when you come down to it, you have to drill it. You can't estimate a resource, and you're not allowed to estimate a resource or a reserve without drilling it. So ultimately, you have to put holes in the ground.
Agreed. But I don't mean to be presumptuous, but I think the essence of this question may be coming from what I understand is evolving as it relates to data mining, and essentially, absolutely. The incumbents, IBM, Extra, have been focused on this for many years now. And certainly, I think it's coming to the evolution where everyone now starts to implement it as part of their exploration efforts as it relates to a broader set of data. And so if that's the essence of the question, yeah, absolutely.
We are doing that.
We're doing that. We're more than amenable to sharing our data to effectively get access to, the broader data set to triangulate as to where we're going. And to Robin's point, we've already done that through our joint ventures and also other projects that we fully own 100%.
Great. And a question here kind of on the overall company strategy. What is the long-term strategy for the company? Do you want to become a producer, or would you look to partner or sell to a producer eventually?
Yeah, it's a question that we get all the time, right? And in the end, the latter option is out of our control, right? We can only do what we can do that's within our control. Clearly, when I identified this project for me personally, I don't mean to speak for anybody else on the team, I had to identify something that was material to a major, to an intermediate producer, to any investor, but also was reasonably developable by a junior, right? So this project, for example, is pretty much the size of Taseko, right? And Taseko, obviously, they stage gate into Gibraltar, rather, as Taseko obviously stage gated into a 75,000 ton per day today. But that is, a reasonable thought that something like this can actually be developed. And so that's something that we could control. And to unlock that today is exactly what we're doing. And through our de-risking of relationships with First Nations, community, environmental monitoring. So we're preparing this for each stage gate. And as you could see on the valuation slide, it's not, you don't have to wait long to get the value appreciation or the re-rating once you pass through these stage gates, and we can finance each stage gate ourselves without over diluting our shareholders, right? So these are the things that are in our control, which we are absolutely going to progress as quickly as possible as this market environment, blossoms as we see it in front of us today. In terms of what strategics are doing, look, I'm an investment banker, obviously. The basis of a lot of my decisions is through information, and I still have many contacts in the industry. And I understand, I think I might have mentioned this to you earlier before we were online. I've identified at least 6 M&A sale processes for copper assets that are either producing or kind of restarts across the globe. But I'm sure there's more, but just through my knowledge base and contacts. And we haven't seen any of these go for various reasons, just given that, obviously it's tough to do due diligence during COVID, tough to do site tours. Things just tend to move slower in this pandemic environment. But what I can say through my past 2 rounds of cycles is that once the door opens and we start to see these transactions, and granted, these are for producing assets, right? So if you think about it, each process has about 20 bidders, right? So that's 6. There's 120 bidders out there, right? Only about 114 of them are going to be really upset, and 6 of them are going to be successful. So those 114 are going to start looking at other opportunities. And as we see the momentum start to build, that group, which right now I would characterize as private equity and strategics, expands to the marginal buyers. People are looking for the higher concentrate product, the purities of the concentrate, the traders, the smelters. There is an incredible expansion when there is resolve around the underlying commodity, which clearly is the reason why we're doing this. But none of that is in our control. So I can tell you what I'm thinking as it relates to my experience, but I can't tell you what's going to happen as it relates to whether we're going to get bought or not. But what is in our control is to prepare ourselves to move this project forward as quickly as possible.
Great. And one question here, and you had kind of addressed this with the slide, but please take us through the drill program. What areas will you be targeting? So
right now, we're currently starting tonight drilling on Red Dog. There's 4 holes. There's 4,000 meters drilling total on Red Dog and Northwest Expo. So there are 4 or 500 meter holes approximately. And then there's 4 holes on Northwest Expo. And then after that, we go over to Hushamu and look for mineralization southeast of Hushamu.
Great. And unless there are any other questions, I have kind of a general one here. Just to kind of review, what news would we expect to have over the coming weeks here from NorthIsle?
Well, as I said, we're very pleased to be initiating the drilling tonight. So there was a little bit of delay in getting the drills on site, and perhaps that has translated into questions. And so I'm glad this question was asked, because again, this is something we've been waiting for a few weeks. And through that process, we will release our program. Typically, in the past, what we've done is we've taken a consolidated approach around gathering the data, interpreting it, and very methodically providing our interpretations. I don't see us departing too much from that, but Robin, you can probably talk about your expectations in terms of timing in general terms as to when we're going to complete drilling at Red Dog and moving on to Northwest Expo and then on to Hushamu.
So we're approximately drilling 60 to 100 meters a day. That's our plan. So you can calculate 2,000 meters, 60 to 100 meters. That's you can do your division into 2,000 on each of those. So the largest delay is assaying currently. There are so many companies putting samples into just a very few labs now that the delay on samples that we put in on August the 5th is not until over a month from when we submitted them. So it'll be at least a month after we have completed the drilling and submitted the samples that we'll get results, and then we have to analyze them, and then after that we'll put out a press release. And that again is the assaying is out of control.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
And then in terms of the longer term perspective, this year, obviously, my perhaps aspirational objective is to get some form of participation agreement with our First Nation partners. We've been in very positive discussions with our communities, the councillors, the chief directly, the governments, and we've seen some very positive responses, certainly around the Artemis story, around the support that they're getting from the provincial government, directly from Premier Horgan and others within the ministry. We see the same support with this government, and they have really been helpful in directing us towards some of these things that we can unlock today. And it really clearly all roads leads through First Nations and communities. And so we would like to crystallize these discussions in the form of an agreement and in the form of positive momentum and sharing and participation in short order. So I don't know when that's going to come, but we are working at it in earnest today to try to put it out, to give people the confidence, obviously, that the development story really is on solid foundation here.
Great.
And then lastly, we are initiating a drill program and a metallurgical program in very short order to address the recoveries on the gold. The copper obviously reports out extremely well. We believe, just based off of gold recoveries at Island Copper, that we can improve them significantly, and it just really requires a little bit more testing. Not only around the combination of lixiviants and reagents, but also potentially adding a cyanide circuit to a pyrite concentrate, which is the clear next step as it relates to recovering the gold.
Great. All right. Well, I think that that about wraps up our Q&A here. I'd like to thank Sam Lee and Robin Tolbert from NorthIsle for presenting today. Thanks everyone out there for tuning in. A reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back with our webinar series next Monday, August 30th, with Energy Fuels presenting at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks, Tim, and thank you very much, Red Cloud. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye-bye.